Welcome everyone to the Average Ontario Anglers Podcast. And we have today episode number 13. You think we'd ever get to 13?
I thought we'd bomb by at least 7.
Yeah. Well, we're still here, and if you're listening, this is what you can expect in this riveting episode. Today's episode is all about fishing pet peeves. Now, Andrew, I didn't ask you to do this before, so you don't know, but make your best pet peeve noise.
Sorry, huh?
Wow. That's mean. Make your favorite pet peeve noise.
That's something that would annoy me? Or
when something annoys you, you have to make this noise.
Okay. It'd be like... Just a sigh. That's
pretty
exasperated sigh.
That's pretty good. I'll show you mine later. But anyway, this episode is all about pet peeves. And all of the questions or the points that we're going to cover today were sent in by you listeners on our Instagram channel. Now, before we start on our pet peeves, Andrew has a very interesting fishing fact.
Ooh.
It better be interesting. Also, last
now
week...
you just made me step up my game, so...
Well, here's the thing. 2 weeks ago, you were like, I'm going to give you a number rating. But then you actually gave me a letter rating. So this time, I'm going to give you a number rating. We'll see what happens. All right. Andrew, the interesting fishing fact. Go ahead.
Okay. So I was thinking of strange baits. And I don't mean like...
Norman Bates?
Not that strange.
Okay.
So I don't mean like those guys where you see like the videos and they're like, I'm going to, will this catch fish? And here's an iPhone with a hook on it. Like,
I hate that.
I put a treble hook on a Nerf gun. Let's see what happens. Like, you're fishing for fish that are just going to hit whatever moves. It's not exciting. So I was looking at actual bait that we just oftentimes don't think of for fish. So, for example, the first bait I'm going to talk about was actually landed a world record fish. It was 2001. It was a blue catfish, 116 pounds.
Wow.
Do you want to guess what that bait was?
A hot dog?
Nope. You're getting kind of close, though. Heavily processed meat.
Kielbasa?
It was Spam.
Oh.
So canned meat, they cube it, and they just stick it on a treble hook, and they go for catfish. And he was known in the area of catching large catfish, and then he actually landed a state and world record blue catfish using Spam.
That's amazing.
Another one is raisins, specifically golden raisins. And they mimic essentially the dried fruit that like fall off bushes and stuff on the riverside or on the side of the bank. And people will actually use them for catfish and carp. So I thought that we talked about before about having interesting... I know we asked Carpy Andrew if he had caught anything interesting
on weird baits.
Carp on weird baits. So raisins could be one to try, perhaps. Golden raisins.
People certainly don't like them.
They're good in the trail mix,
I guess.
But specifically the golden ones. And what they say is when they land in the water, they start to rehydrate, and they actually will give off their fermentation, and that attracts the fish supposedly. Another one which is odd. Vegetarians will love this one. Zucchini. Not that vegetarians would be like catching fish, but the zucchini. So apparently you cut it in half so the flesh is exposed, and then again stick that on a treble hook. That is used for carp and catfish as well. Something I had never heard of. Gum. That's chewing gum. That's full on MacGyver right there. Oh. So yeah, chewing gum. Apparently you chew it for a few minutes till it gets like you can like wad it and you just wrap it around your hook. You ever use it like power bait, like dough?
I've never used this stuff. I don't know.
I'd never used it myself, and then I got outfished by a guy in the East Coast, and all he was putting was power bait dough on a hook, and he was outproducing me. I couldn't catch a thing, and he's like, here, another one. Like, it didn't make sense. So I guess it's similar to that, but again, it's like generally fruit flavors are best for those. Here's one. Soap. Have you ever heard of using soap?
Like a bar of soap?
Yeah.
No, that's super weird.
That's bizarre. So it makes sense when you think about it. What if you had to guess, why do you think soap at all might be a fish attractant?
Does it have to do with like something like the pH imbalance or something?
You don't have to think that hard about it.
Okay. I don't know.
So soap is made from lye and fat. So lye is like ashes, kind of similar, and fat. So when you get pure soap, like without all the fancy like dyes and odor and stuff like that, perfumes, it's often made like I believe ivory soap is still made with beef tallow. So it's beef fat that's like rendered down, and that's gives the soap consistency. So apparently they'll cut a chunk of that off, put on a hook, and catfish will eat it. It's a catfish bait. I kind of want to try that one.
That's interesting. But it seems like catfish will basically eat anything.
A lot of these are for catfish.
Yeah.
It's like I'm sensing a pattern here.
Yeah.
But I was thinking it's in a survival situation, that's a good tip to have. But it's also if you are really packing light, you can turn your your personal hygiene bag into your bait pail as well.
And again, if any of you try any of these weird things and catch a fish on it, please let us know.
Or if you have 100%, let us know if you use this stuff.
Because we're certainly not going to try it.
Another one is peanut butter, which doesn't actually makes a lot of sense. So they take peanut butter and cornmeal or pieces of white bread and they roll it together and they put it on a hook and it's like a boilie essentially. And they use it for carp.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I would try that.
A couple others that are kind of honorable mentions is chicken livers, which I know I've used before. I'm not sure if you have, Jesse, but
No.
again, for catfish.
Yep.
Bacon, raw bacon. Some people say it's better hickory smoked, but by far it's general consensus on the bacon side of it. I don't know how big of a pool that is that you're pulling from for information. But
rather eat bacon than give it to a fish.
Yeah, me too. And then cheese, which, again, great snack.
Yeah, true.
For both you and the fish.
So if you lose your bait or you run out of bait and you look into your lunch pail, you can probably use something to catch fish.
And like people have used like their peanut butter and jam sandwich and they're like, oh, this is all I have. And I was like, put on a hook. And yeah, like I said, catfish, they're just very opportunistic feeders. So if they in any way, like any way or form sense that seems edible, they'll just stuff it in their face.
They're like the slimy swimming goats of the sea. They'll eat anything. Tin
I
cans.
like goats. I like that.
Yeah. And they have little chin whiskers too, just like a goat.
So by you mentioning catfish earlier, you kind of ruined my punchline at the end of it.
Okay.
That's fine.
Go ahead. I'll pretend to be surprised.
All right. So what do you think is the common theme of all of these things?
I don't know, Andrew.
If you could use any of these to catch one particular species of fish, what would you say it would be?
Oh, man, I can't think of anything.
If you said tarpon, you're incorrect.
That was my second choice.
So catfish. And I'm not sure about, again, like the record was a blue cat, but I'm sure all catfish are pretty similar in their diets. But yeah, that's my interesting fishing fact.
And again, some of these seem a bit bizarre, but hey, if it catches fish, it catches fish. You don't need fancy stuff to catch fish all the time. So that's interesting.
I think I want to try the soap one just because it's so bizarre. I'd like to see if it's even possible.
Well, here's the thing. We're going on a fishing trip this fall to a river that has a lot of catfish in it, channel catfish. So maybe that might be a good time to try it.
I'm down.
Okay, we're going to try it. We'll get back to you. So in September in our podcast, we'll talk about Andrew's soap failure.
If in September in our podcast, if we don't mention soap, it's because it didn't work.
All right, I'm going to give you a rating for that. I'm going to give you a letter rating. And I'm going to do this Andrew style.
72.
72. I was actually going to say 74. I'll give you a solid 74 for that.
All right. That's okay.
Yeah, you'll take that. Anyway, so.
Are there any Angel supporters who will fight for me out there?
Probably not. Anyway, so we're actually really excited, before we get into our main topic, to talk about our podcast sponsor of episode 13. And it is from our friend Jeff at Limestone Lures.
Cool guy.
Now, we've been talking with Jeff and buying his baits for a few years now, and we actually just got to meet him for the first time in person at CanCast.
Yeah, we met him on Zoom a couple times before. And
yeah, we've actually on their podcast, which I'll link below in the show notes. They actually had us on as a guest twice.
Yeah,
and it was great. It was us, Jeff, Adam, and Ben from Paddleheads. And we discussed a lot of different topics. I think the first episode we were talking about early spring fishing. And then the second one we were talking about our experiences at CanCast. So definitely check out their podcast. It's the Fish On Podcast. And again, we'll link that in the show notes. But anyway, Jeff is from Kingston. They're from Kingston. He makes a lot of baits, like a lot. Like his booth at CanCast was actually, I know we mentioned this before, but it was fantastic.
Yeah.
He did a really good job on his booth. It looked really good. Not to trash other people's booths, but his was by far one of the best ones I saw. But he makes a ton of baits, and baits that we've actually bought and have had success on. So we're happy to have paired with him. And some of the baits that we're just going to talk a little bit now, and we'll talk more later. But some of the baits that we personally bought from Jeff and have done well on, For me, he has a worm. It's a 5.5-inch worm, I'm pretty sure, or a 6-inch worm. It's called his wink worm. I like the names that people come up with for their baits. I always think it's funny. But the wink worm, it's a straight tail worm. It's like a finesse worm. You can fish it on a shaky head. You can Texas rig it. You can probably wacky rig it too. What I was doing with it is I was power drop shotting with it. And I was drop shotting on a slightly heavier line, probably about 10-pound fluorocarbon, maybe 12. And I was fishing along weed edges for largemouth and smallmouth. Now, you can oftentimes drop shot use a lot of smaller baits, but I actually like using a bigger profile, especially in the summer when their metabolism's up and they're looking for bigger baits. Catch bigger fish, I think, myself. I think that's what happened. But he has the wink worm. We did really well on that in some of the Kawartha Lakes. Lots of good colors. It was really good for me. Other baits that we bought, he also makes a really good drop shot bait called the ripple worm.
Yep.
I know we picked up some at CanCast this year. He has a new color, that color shift color.
Yes, it's pretty cool.
It's very cool. So if you haven't checked that out, check out his Instagram page. He has this, I don't even know what it's called, the color shift. It's like, you look at the thing and it's like
brown. And then you hold it up to the light, like any UV light, anything like that, and all of a sudden it shines through and it just goes blue. So if in low light conditions, or when it's not like direct sunlight right through the bait, you're going to get kind of like a blue halo effect around like the brown. It's pretty cool.
It's very interesting. You have to see it to understand what we're saying. So definitely check that out. He also makes paddle tail swim baits, which are classic. I actually bought a bunch of packs of his green pumpkin brown color. And I use that on the back of a swim jig. You can also just put them on a jig head. He also makes tons of ice fishing baits.
Yeah, I bought the Duke, which is his big swim bait,
6-inch,
or big paddle tail.
Yep.
And that's gonna get some use this year too. It's a really nice size paddle tail. Like, it's thick, not crazy long. I think it's 6 inches or something like that. So it's perfect for like those predator fish to get that big strike, but it's not so crazy that you can't cast it with your moderate gear.
For sure. And then he also just started making tubes as well. So his tube bait is called the Rude Tube, which is pretty funny. Anyway, we're going to get more into what the giveaway actually includes. We're going to kind of do that halfway through the podcast, so stay tuned for that. But we're going to get into our main topic. And as we mentioned before, it is fishing pet peeves. Now, on our Instagram, if you ever want to interact and have something added to the podcast, make sure you follow our Instagram, because that's where we accept all of our Q&As. So I put up this poll at lunchtime today, or when we recorded this, and I have 80 responses. And some of them were all the same. A lot of people are really peeved about certain things. So I put them in kind of an order that I think would be funny. So we're going to talk about them and see where it goes. I think this will be a funny episode. So one of the biggest pet peeves that a lot of people have is ramp etiquette.
We just experienced this too.
Yeah. So we have a story to start off. So like ramp etiquette, if you're not aware, when you're backing your boat into the water, you should be fast. You should be efficient.
Yeah. You should not be blocking the ramp until you're ready to launch.
Yeah.
You can pull out to the side of the head, get prepped, and then launch here as fast as possible. You want to keep that ramp, which is the busiest part of that area, you want to keep it freely moving as best as possible.
Yeah. Don't be that idiot that's backed right up in front of the ramp and then decides to, get everything ready and take things apart and then, oh, where's my boat plug and all that stuff. You should be ready to launch when you back up.
Yeah. Even I know for myself, I make it a habit to make sure that when we go somewhere and it's like we're going to the boat launch, if no one's there, it's like a not very well used boat or not commonly used one, I still make it a point to not park right at the bottom, even though I'm not going to hold anyone up, because maybe that's the time someone else is going to come down and they're already prepped because they live a minute down the road.
Yep.
And they're ready to just throw it in. Like, I'd hate to be that guy that's holding up the local and then get a bad name on myself.
Yeah. And it's annoying because sometimes on busy lakes, like we live near the Kawartha Lakes, which are very heavily pressured. Yeah. Sometimes there's a lineup, and there's always that oblivious person that it's like they don't care, or they don't even understand that everyone's waiting for them.
It's a public launch. I can do what I want. It's
it's
a boat launch, not boat sit around and look at your boat.
Now, here's the thing. If you're a beginner, say you just buy a boat, not everyone. There's people out there, they're like, oh, if you can't back up a boat, you're an idiot. If you're just starting out and this is your first year getting a boat, guess what? It takes some practice.
Yes.
Again, you shouldn't get overly mad if someone's trying to back up their boat and it's not happening the first few times. Be patient, give them a few minutes, let them do it. But at the same time, don't be that person that gets to the launch and has no idea. Like, maybe practice on the side road or in a parking lot. Practice before you go, because we have an example of that. So we were fishing for crappie last week, or a few weeks ago now. and someone was bringing in a Sea-Doo. Now we were ready to come in. Andrew was about to back up the trailer.
Yeah, I in the boat. So generally, what happens? Jesse dropped me off on shore, so I go grab my car and I backed on the trailer, and we pull up in the trailer, and I drive out of the launch. Like we're in and out. In
I drive right
2
onto onto his trailer, and then he hooks it up and pulls it out, and we're out of there in like 30 seconds.
So no one's at the boat launch when you get there. Like no one was there. I drive up, and I'm just about to get into my car and drive. Another guy in a truck and a Sea-Doo trailer starts backing down the ramp.
Yeah, because there was a guy who was buying a Sea-Doo. He was out in the water.
Yeah,
and it was funny because they had like
sorry, my mistake. The one guy launched this. Right, he launched the Sea-Doo off his trailer. No problem. He was gone. Pulls his truck out. I go to pull my car down. Another guy whips into his other truck on his own trailer. Now to the guy who's buying the Sea-Doo. I'm like, I was technically next in line.
Yeah. And I'm waiting in the boat, and I'm waiting, and these guys, it's funny because they run like $130,000 dually pickup truck, and they did not know how to back up a truck at all. In fact, what happened is the one guy was backing up the truck after several attempts. It was pouring rain too. I was like waiting in the boat.
Yeah.
They actually, two of the guys got out and lifted the trailer up back down the ramp while the guy backed
They
down.
held it up and just walked behind the truck
guy
holding the trailer.
Had no idea how to do it. Now, like, again, probably the first time he's ever backed up a trailer, but at the same time, be a little bit prepared when you're going to do that, okay? But this happens all the time, and that's why there's so many people.
The other big thing with that too, though, is even after that, they get it on, they pulled up, and they parked in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Because the trailer wasn't weighted properly, because this is the first time he's put this Sea-Doo on it, so it was really back weighted. So they had to start, adjusting the trailer, but they're parked in the middle of the road, getting all these tools out, trying to move this thing. Like
we had to ask them to move.
We're like, your truck. We need to leave now.
Can you guys move your truck? And they were like, oh yeah, we'll move it. It's like, guys, come on, man.
So anyway. It sounds like we're being harsh on these guys. The thing is, it's aggravating because there's such a more simple way to do it. And here's the thing too. I've been on boat launches, and I remember going camping with my dad. My dad was experienced in driving his trailer. There's someone else at the boat launch, and they might be struggling, and there's people getting upset. Just because people can get upset, that's fine too. But again, be patient with those who are learning or who might not be super comfortable yet. And you'd see them getting flustered. So my dad, he just hey, would it help if I backed it down for you? They'd offer to help, and they'd be so happy, and dad would go, one shot, it's in there, pull the boat up, just help him out. If you're polite and be nice, you can often help the situation instead of just exacerbating it and making things worse. Yeah. So the etiquette can be on both sides. Make sure you're a good person.
Be patient.
Yeah. Yeah. And offer some good help if you can.
Yeah. To add to the point before, we were talking about those guys at the boat launch that didn't know how to back up their trailer. We're not mad at the fact that they didn't know how to back up the trailer. We were mad at their oblivious behavior of wasting so much time parking in front of the boat launch, stuff that you would never do. And it was probably just ignorance. They didn't know. Obviously, they had no clue what they were doing. They had no clue about that. But come on. Yeah. Anyway, we could go on about ramp etiquette for a while, but we have so many points to cover, so we're just going to zoom to the next one. The main one that I got literally at least 25 people mentioned was their main pet peeve in fishing is people not cleaning up their trash. And that is a huge pet peeve for me. I was always, when I grew up, my parents were like, no littering. That's bad. You never litter. Yep. And you see people they don't even care. They just, they'll have a big wad of fishing line, pull it off the reel and just throw it on the ground. It's like, seriously?
Yeah.
That doesn't bother your conscience at all? Nope, they don't care. They throw their cigarettes on the ground. They throw their fishing line on the ground.
Even camping, you go to the campsite and there's just trash everywhere.
Yeah,
they're not burying
candy wrappers, beer cans. It's like, come on.
Yeah, and here's the thing: you had a fire clearly because you burned everything else, including your tent,
burn
and
your garbage.
Just burn the garbage with it. Finish it off.
We talked a little bit, I think maybe 2 episodes ago, about fishing around private property and how you can't. And this is one of the main reasons why places get closed is because people litter. And we've gone to, remember that pond we used to fish? You'd go there and for a while it would be clean,
pristine.
And then you'd go there and people would dump a whole bunch of garbage out of their truck. It would be garbage bags.
Yeah. Mattresses.
That's dumping.
Bikes,
that may not be fishermen per se, but don't leave anything.
Yeah.
Literally. Not
well, how many times do you go to, you go to the bank and you're fishing, and let's say you have really good etiquette yourself and you stop, I'm going to fish this hole, and you stop to look around and you see
Tim Hortons cups,
worm
boxes
everywhere. Like,
fishing lure packaging, fishing line, all this stuff. Come on, guys, clean it up. Take it out with you. I'm really mad now. I'm like, you know, like the
let's go to a later one.
All right, this one is more like, it's a more funny one, and I thought this was funny. Someone's biggest pet peeve is walleye versus pickerel, and we're talking about walleye. And Andrew's going to go into this in depth, but I'm going to tell you.
I'm like chomping at the bit on this one.
Usually it's up north or the older gen that call them pickerel. The fact is, they're not called pickerel. They're actually called walleye. That's a scientific fact.
Yes.
You're wrong if you call them pickerel. You're allowed to call them whatever you want. You can call them.
My grandpa always called them pickerel. You know what? I'm not going to argue with my grandpa.
No, I'm not going to argue, but it's a slang for a walleye. It's called walleye. So when people correct me and say, actually, it's pickerel, it literally
it's walleye.
It's literally not. So you're wrong. And I will challenge you any day if you say it's pickerel, because it's literally not.
So there's Jesse's exactly right. There are two different species, completely different families of fish. Yeah. So a walleye, very similar to a sauger, similar to a sauger. The crossbreed is a sawguy. So those are similar fish. A pickerel is in the Essex family, Esox family.
It's related to pike.
So if you Google chain pickerel, is one of them. So on the east coast in Canada, in the northeast states, chain pickerel are all throughout that water system, and they look almost identical to pike. They're very hard to differentiate between a pike and a pickerel. Mm-hmm. That is what a pickerel is. So if you are talking to anyone who has both of those fish in the area or in their province, and you ask them, oh, where are you fishing for? And they say pickerel, you know they're talking about chain pickerel. If you're fishing for walleye, they will say walleye. They have to differentiate them because they have the same species. Here in Ontario, we don't have the chain pickerel. So for many, it just became, like you said, like slang, and they didn't feel the need to differentiate it because there's no confusion over here.
Yeah. So really, it's walleye, guys. Come on. All right, the next one, and this was also a very popular pet peeve. A lot of people get infuriated by sea-doos. I had literally probably 25 plus people be like,
that's when you get the 80-pound braid and the 1 ounce egg sinker.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
So here's the thing, like, I'm sure it's a fun hobby. I've never been on a sea-doo myself. Because
I wouldn't own one because they're expensive, but if I rented a cottage and there was one there, I would have a blast on it.
Oh, 100%. And I have nothing against people that like sea-doos. On small lakes, no. Yeah. Annoying. They're annoying, and most people that ride on them are annoying people. No offense. Most people that I know that own sea-doos, you can tell, you're like, yeah, I can see that. You know what I mean? So if you're fishing, and it's happened to us. Remember that time we were on muskie fishing last fall?
Yep.
We were fishing in this bay for muskie, and it was like early October, late September. Quiet. We were fishing against the bank, and these 6 sea-doo guys came and whipped all the way around our boat within like 20 feet of us on this huge lake.
Yeah.
It's like, why are you near us? Yeah. For any reason? And they were just like revving around doing donuts. It's like, get away from it. Like, now the spot's ruined.
Yeah. It completely blown.
Have some etiquette.
So yeah, it's unfortunately, sea-doos as a whole get a bad rap. It's not the sea-doos themselves, it's the operators that are the issue.
Yeah.
Because if someone was in a bass boat doing the same thing, ripping around me in circles at 20 feet away, I'd be upset at them. But they generally have more etiquette. They understand because they don't want someone doing that to them. Sea-doos, it's often like social. They love getting together. They love doing stuff. So I find they tend to get very close, and that's the issue I have with them, is they start getting too close unnecessarily.
A lot of sea-doers, though, like I said, they're a certain type of people.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are oblivious. Like, here's the thing. If I was on a sea-doo because I fish, I would know to stay away from people that are fishing. Mm-hmm. I would know that because I fish. These people don't fish, obviously, so they come really close. And, you know, and it's not just sea-doos. It's people with wake boats or power boats. Give us some space. At the same time, you have to understand it's a free public lake that you're fishing on probably. Yep. You can't really do anything. I mean, you can't, chuck an egg sinker at their head. Sometimes you wish you could, but you can't do that.
And at times, too, like if you're seeing, let's say he's like a wakeboarder, and he's taking like a path or a skier, and they have a path that's the one they take because they know that it's, it's safe, it's good water, whatever, it stays calm in that area. 100%, there's nothing wrong with that. And if we're fishing, we're not going to start paddling canoe into their path.
Yeah.
We're going to avoid that section. So again, just being aware of what's going on and who's around you, what's doing what, just be a little courteous.
You have to share the water.
There's not going to be issues. Yeah.
Everyone has to share the water. And like it would be great if every time we went to the lake and it was just calm and no boats were ripping around, but that's in this area anyway. That's not ever going to happen.
At the same time, water sports are a blast. So like 100% have fun in the lake, but like it'd be kind of cool to have designated areas of water.
That'd be cool. All right, the next one is a few people said this. One of their biggest pet peeves is people who always keep their limit. And I get it. It depends on the area. Again, in Ontario, it's a very vast province. So many lakes, 250,000 lakes. Some of the lakes up north, there's probably people be like, oh, there's so many fish up there, you can never put a dent into it. But if you're fishing, anywhere in the States and Canada in popular areas, keeping your limit every time you go out, again, that's technically your right. But is it the best thing to do? Some of the lakes around us, we know, they got fished out.
Yeah.
Like there used to be certain species of fish. They were over harvested and now there's literally nothing. And you can't tell me, oh, that had nothing to do with people keeping fish. 100% it did. Where do you think the fish went? They flew away?
Yeah.
I'm not against keeping fish. We keep fish. We eat fish. I'm not going to keep my limit every time I go out.
Yeah.
And if you do keep fish every time you go out, maybe keep 2 instead of 6. Like how much fish do you really need?
Especially bass. Like when Jesse and I, our rule of thumb is we keep a 2-pounder. We don't go bigger because they stop tasting as good.
If we're camping.
And it's smaller, it's not worth it. Yeah, like we don't go out and we go for bass and we keep it. Like 99% of the time when you go bass fishing, it's catch and release 100%.
If we're camping and we can't catch any walleye and we catch a bass, we're going to eat it.
Yeah, I'll fish fry it up. Like
it's not my choice of fish to eat.
No. But again, like
I have nothing against people keeping
even
bass.
At that point though, if we keep a bass, we'll keep maybe 1 bass each, 1 2-pounder each.
Yeah.
And that is like full fish fry. Like we can't physically eat more than that as an individual in a sitting. So there's no point for us to keep our 6 bass that we can keep or whatever.
Yeah.
Just again, that's our opinion. Yeah, keeping your limit every single time you go out, that can put a damper on
100%.
On
like
the population.
I think of like our parents' generation. There's tons of pictures of, our relatives just holding up full stringers, just
5-pounders.
All 5-pounder like bass, and it's like, oh, those lakes don't have fish in them anymore. It's like, yeah, I wonder why.
Or they say, you don't know how to catch them. It's like, no.
Actually, that's another pet peeve coming up. Actually, let's just cover that one now. One of my biggest pet peeves is when old timers, bless their soul, compare now to when it used to be. It's not the same at all. My dad would always tell me stories like, oh, we used to fish this popular Kawartha Lake now, and we'd catch 5 and 6 pounders all the time, and they have all these pictures of all these fish that they caught, and it was super easy. And dude, like they fish like the most basic techniques. You do the same thing there now, you'd be lucky to catch a 3-pounder. Like times have changed. Yeah. I don't take into consideration
pressure has increased.
Old records and old experiences that old people have as being comparable to now. It's not the same at all. Now, that being said, there's probably better smallmouth bass fishing in Ontario now than there was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Using electronics and all modern technology and techniques, fishing is easier than it is, but the fish populations are a lot lower than they used to be.
And the fishing pressure, there's a lot more anglers out here, intelligent anglers fishing, and the fish learn. They'll learn to avoid certain things. Even now with forward-facing sonar, they're having to advance it further and further, because before it's like, 30 feet away, you could catch that fish. Now you have to cast 100 feet away because they're hearing the ping.
Yep.
So, there's better technology now, and it's amazing. But at the same time, the fish are becoming more and more pressured. Not the fish is getting smarter, but it has learned to adapt to the pressure that's on these species too.
They will adapt, and they will be harder to catch. That's another reason why always new lures are coming out, because a lot of these lakes, like a lot of the cool new innovative lures come from Japan, right? In Japan, they have several lakes that are super pressured and clear.
Yes,
that's why they come out with all these crazy bougie techniques that help them actually catch fish, because the fish are so pressured, and it's not even slightly as pressured as that here. But that's why new lures that come out, professional anglers or guides are always willing to try new stuff, because it might give them a slight edge for a little bit where they can catch more fish. And I honestly believe that sometimes little differences can make a huge difference. All right, this was a popular one too. A lot of people are annoyed with a terrible net man or woman. Now, I
definitely used to fit that category.
No, I have to say though, the last few years, me and Andrew, we're on the ball when it comes to net. Like we've never lost a big fish at the net, especially like half the insane muskie that we've caught that have been flipping through the air. Like I've got them in for Andrew and he's got mine in. Like it's been good. But
I've even had some like your big bass last year. I was able to net that.
Yeah.
And it's through the hook like midair, and I still like managed to grab that thing.
But I've seen horror stories and videos of people like You know, have like a 50-inch muskie, and some guy is just like
stabbing at it.
So I get it. It's inexperience.
Yes.
There are some basic techniques of how to net fish, and I think the main one is head first.
Yeah, we should do a video actually on netting fish, because that'd be informative, because that's a good skill to learn in order to keep your friends.
Yeah. Always net the fish head first. Never chase the fish. If you try to scoop it by the tail, it'll just jump away from you.
It'll spook. It touches the tail and they spook. Done.
Yeah. There are a few different techniques, but definitely if you want to keep your friends, like Andrew said, you literally have to learn how to keep fish.
If you want to get invited back onto that bass boat, don't lose his personal best on him.
All right, next one. A lot of people were peeved by this, probably over a dozen people. Line crossing.
Yep.
And we have a story about that too, but a lot of this was people talking about steelhead fishing or salmon fishing in the creeks.
Yes.
Because when you fish in the creeks, again, a lot of these creeks aren't huge, and you're fishing, and there may be a lot of people along the bank, and you all kind of have to synchronize your drifts. So your lines are all going down at the same time. Everyone lifts up and kind of casts in. It's all synchronized so that no one gets tangles. Now, does this always happen perfectly? Hey, you know, if you and your buddies are great at fishing, or you have a lot of experience doing it, it might be pretty flawless. But guess what? Not everyone is as experienced.
Yep.
And you know, things happen. The air got to it. You know, like things happen. You get tangles, and people will oftentimes cross over your line, or like say you're drifting down, someone will just cast right over your line. Or if you're fighting a fish, sometimes you'll have a fish on, someone will cast over your line, and sometimes they'll hook your line. So we have actually a story about that. And Andrew will start off this because it just makes me mad.
So we were shore casting.
Wait, my mad noise. Okay.
So we were shore casting for salmon, which if you're interested, we have a great video about that on our YouTube. little plug there.
We'll put the link down below.
So we were fishing at a harbor, and we're casting out, and again there's a few guys along the bank, and it's about 100-foot or 200-foot section of bank that you
and
can
it was
cast out.
It was nighttime.
We're all using glow spoons, right? And you fire it out straight, because all the salmon, they're coming around and they just follow the bank side. They just swim in giant circles in the area as they stage. So you don't have to cast like left to right like we talked about in our other shore casting.
You can just cast.
You just cast straight, and as salmon move along, you hope that your spoon's in front of them. So Jesse had cast out, like hooks this great salmon, and it starts jumping, and it peels off some line.
And as soon as I hooked it, I'm like, fish on. You're supposed to yell fish on so people know there's a fish on.
And so the guys beside us, like they reeled in their lines. I reeled in my line, and Jesse's fighting this fish, and then it makes a beeline all the way like hard left, and it's about 50 feet from the shore still, but it just rips along the shore like 100 feet to the side. So Jesse yells to the people down there, fish on.
It's heading your way.
Yeah,
you know?
To give them fair warning, and like
they just
9 of the 10 guys pulled in their line.
Yep.
Another guy just casts again right over top of the line.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden he's yelling, fish on, and Jesse's like, you have my line.
Because I had constant pressure on the fish. At this point, the fish had done its initial run, and it was kind of just, you know, head shaking down there, and I felt just like pulls.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the guy had snagged my line and was pulling on it, and I said to him, you snagged my line, like you're fighting. And he's like, no, it's mine. Like it's a separate fish. And then I was like, watch your rod. So as I pulled my rod, his rod would bend down. I'm like, clearly you've hooked my line.
And we're all using glow spoons, and so again, it's at nighttime. So what you see is this Jesse's rod bent in half, and then 100 feet away you see a salmon jump, and then 20 feet up the line you see this glowing spoon. It's like, clearly that's not even in a fish.
Yeah.
So eventually Jesse, again, like, this guy fought him for like 10 minutes.
Yeah,
kept fighting
I
it,
kept
refusing
telling
to
him
say.
though. I said, like, open your bail, let me get this fish in so you can get your hook back. And he's like, no, I'm hooked on the fish. That's your spoon. This guy, he was clearly a moron.
Yeah.
And then eventually the fish, it broke me off.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure his hook basically cut my line.
Yeah.
And the guy still didn't. And everyone fishing near us was like, what are you, an idiot? Like, can't you see that?
Everyone else.
Oh, man. And I was so mad. Not even that I lost the fish, just because, like, the guy was completely
the stupidity of having to deal with it. That's all.
Yeah. All right. Next one. Poor fish handling. This is a big one for me.
All I can think of right now is a while ago, Jesse had this picture of a steelhead sent to him, and he's like, Andrew, look at this. And we were asked to share it on our Instagram feed. Yeah. And I look and like, what is that? Like a log? This thing was like double battered, rolled in mud and sand. Like look at this sweet steelhead. Like, that thing looks like trash.
Yeah.
There's so much dirt in his gills. Like, what's going on?
The fish 100% died.
I think of that sometimes. Every time it just makes me like crack up because the audacity to think, oh, post this. It's a great picture. Oh. You can't even tell it's a trout.
Yeah, that's a log, sir. So if you're taking pictures for Instagram for fish, yeah, again, respect the fish. That's the main thing I say to people. Respect the fish. A lot of time when we're fishing for steelhead, if you want to pull them out of the water to take a picture, that's fine. But remember, this fish just exerted all of its energy. It's having a hard time catching its breath, and then you're holding it out of the water, so it's basically suffocating. And they'll hold them out of the water for like 30 seconds, 60 seconds. They're on the bank just gasping for air. Bring a net with you for any species. Bring a net, keep the fish in the water, take it out of the water for a quick snap, put it back in the net. Mm-hmm. Easy. If you're ever fishing and taking a picture and your fish is covered in sand, you did it wrong. If you're ever fishing and want to take a picture and your fish is covered in dirt and leaves, you did it wrong. If you're ever fishing and taking a picture and the fish is dry, you're doing it wrong. That fish is going to die. It's very disrespectful. A lot of people do it, and a lot of people are like, I forgot my net at home.
Yeah. Most anglers are great at this. Yeah. And again, a lot of the time it's the inexperienced that are doing this.
I see a lot of bigger accounts, and they'll be posting pictures of fish that have tons of leaves and sand on them. It's like,
that's true as well.
You literally just bank that fish, and that's very disrespectful to the fish. But again, do what you want. If you want to disrespect fish, that's up to you. But that's a huge pet peeve.
Just know you're getting judged heavily on whenever you post that photo.
and you're probably like, you're all high and mighty. But I guarantee if you look through our posts on Instagram, generally speaking, we try our best. It's one of the things, like me and Andrew, we invest heavily into proper nets. Like we're huge on nets.
When we
got
fishing,
into musky fishing.
Yeah, when we got into musky fishing, Jesse and I pulled our money together to purchase a musky sized net because we wanted to be able to land this fish effectively, and get it released, because they're not going to keep it. So we got a proper size musky net
for the safety of the fish.
For the safety of the fish.
Yeah.
So again, like, is it more an investment? Yes, but at the same time, you're investing money into the hobby that you like. Yeah. If everyone's doing their part to help these fish get released and survive and have a higher chance of survival, then you're helping yourselves, because now you can catch that fish again. And carp anglers, a lot of them are really good at taking care of, like they hold carp on a huge pedestal.
Oh yeah.
But carp are very hardy fish. Carp can probably withstand more abuse than any other species.
Yeah.
But they treat them really, really well, and they keep them wet. They can gulp air from the surface. They're not going to suffocate being out of water, but they make sure they're like always soaking them down or wetting them,
keeping them on a nice mat.
Yep. They hold them carefully. If it's going to fall, they have to make sure they hug it. Like they're really good at fishing etiquette.
Yeah.
In most cases. Any serious carp angler is.
Yeah. I was going to add too, just to add, experience will get you there. Like, I'm sure everyone can look back at pictures they took when they were younger fishing and just cringe at the bad fish handling. So I'm not saying that we've never had bad fish handling. I'm saying there's always time to start improving and doing it the proper way.
Yes. And
that time for you is now. If you have pictures of fish with sand on them in your phone, the time is now, my friend, to start bringing a net with you and being a little more respectful to your fish. Now, hey, if you're going to keep fish, do whatever you want with them. Still be respectful to them. They are a living thing until you kill them. Yeah. And again, we'll get more into this. There's also specific ways you shouldn't hold fish. But again, this is we have to zoom through these because there's so many of them. The next thing that some people have the biggest pet peeve about is your mom. Just kidding. I just added that.
I completely understand. Love you, Mom.
One big pet peeve, and a few people mention this, is when people do not look behind them when they're casting. Now, I've never got hit by a lure from someone else casting. It's been a few close calls, but
that was me.
A lot of people do that, and this is oftentimes a bad thing if you're fishing in a public area like a park or something. And you'll see people and they won't even look behind them, and they're just casting like a jerkbait with 3 treble hooks.
I know some areas where they've now posted no fishing signs because of the bylaw, and it's for safety purposes, because there's the walking path right behind you. And people were at risk, and kids and stuff walking by, like they're excited to see, someone's like fishing, and they run up. Person whips back for a cast and just nails some kid into the chin with like some 4-aught hook. Like that's not good.
It can be potentially like deadly.
Life altering. You can get that in your eye. You're blind.
And even if it's not in your eye, like no one wants a jerkbait in their shoulder or their head. Anyway, always check where you're casting.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens. Mistakes happens when you're in the boat or on the bank with your buddies, but definitely not want to snag some random stranger. That's just a bad way to make a friend. All right, the next one is a lot of people.
I want a rom-com now where that's the meet cute. Like, he hooked her, and now she's hooked on him.
I'd see that movie. So a lot of people have an extreme pet peeve about people who don't know the regulations. Now,
That's one of mine.
I know you. That's big for you, and for me too. I find it extremely annoying because
a lot of the times
it's so accessible.
I found it's an excuse. They know they're breaking the law, and they just say, "Oh, I just don't know. I didn't know." And it's like, okay, if you are trying to hide the fact you have a sack full of walleye during their spawn, you know that that's not right.
Yeah,
you know, like it's. So yeah, seeing, or they have like, oh, there's possession limits on this, and they just are throwing and filleting everything quick so that you can't tell what's in the bucket. It's like, okay, but how many 4-inch bass did you catch, or 6-inch bass and fillet along with all the sunfish, and you way past your possession limit.
Yeah.
So stuff like that is you're just hurting the populations you're hurting the fish as a whole, because these regulations are there to protect the fish.
And these are
they have closed seasons for a reason. They have possession limits for a reason. And again, we keep fish sometimes, but again, we don't keep our limit every time. We don't see there's a need to ourselves, and we definitely don't keep over our limit because
or fish out of season. Yeah, and you know what though? People that don't follow the regulations, they're not anglers.
Yeah,
they're what I like to call poachers. If you don't follow the regs, like the regs are easy to find. They're online. Generally speaking, they're fairly easy to understand. I mean, maybe there's some confusing parts about exceptions.
They're
you can find out.
Yeah. They are free. The booklet is free. You
Look
find
it up
that
online, free.
Yep.
And generally speaking,
you can download a PDF. You can view it online. You can
ask people.
You can ask other people like, hey, there's a lot of times like at the ramp, and someone will be fishing there, or they come up and like, hey, like, what are you fishing for? And like, oh, we're going for bass, we're going for walleye, we're going for crappie, and they're like, oh, I'm hoping to do that too. How many can you keep? And they'll ask, okay, well, this is zone whatever, and I'll often try and talk to them and help them so that they can then learn how to read the regs in the future. Because I'm like, hey, it's always a good idea to check every year because they change. Just every year, just double check if it has any changes, if there's any exceptions. But you can pull it up right in the phone, and I'll show them on the phone if I can of the regulations, where they are, and how to read it, so that in the future, it might just be ignorance. They don't know how. So take the time if you can, and educate people on how they can find that information for themselves.
For sure. And like, again, it's out there. You can find the information. And again, sometimes like there are people that do it on purpose. Yeah. There are people, again, you said they're just ignorant to they don't know. It's maybe their first time fishing. They didn't know you couldn't keep. Like I know I have some friends from overseas that came over, and they didn't know. They were like, oh, we're catching all these fish, filling a whole bucket. I'm like, you can't do that. That's illegal.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I didn't know. So again, it happens.
Yep.
But again, be polite. Maybe the person didn't know. I wouldn't just start screaming at them and stuff. Just tell them. Anyway, before we go on, we're gonna talk a little bit more about our podcast sponsor, Limestone Lures. On this podcast, we like to partner up with companies that we personally have been dealing with for years, and that we can actually, with a good conscience, recommend their products. Mm-hmm. All of the brands that we've actually dealt with, we've actually have their products before we ever dealt with them on our podcast.
And again, we don't get kickbacks for this. We're all these giveaways that have happened so far, and all the ones we have planned so far in the future, they are full giveaways. They sponsor by just putting together the giveaway to give to the listeners.
Yeah. So, and you may ask, why are you guys doing that? Well, to tell you the truth, we want to have some good giveaways to you guys so that we can get more people listening to the podcast. Again, we're not getting any money off of this. Maybe one day we'll get, $5, but who knows? But some of these giveaways, they're pretty good. Like as you said a few weeks ago, like the giveaways the last few weeks have been really good.
Yeah.
And actually the whole podcast, really, they've all been fantastic. But Jeff at Limestone Lures, he really, he knocked it out of the park with this one. Because originally he was like, oh yeah, I'll give you some baits and stuff. Yeah, no problem. And I was like, oh, that's fantastic. Because we love Jeff. He showed me a video. He's like, oh, here's all the stuff I ended up getting for the giveaway. And it's like, it's a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
So this is the giveaway. This is amazing, by the way. So he is giving away 23 bags of baits. 23 bags of baits. And that is $140 value. And he's going to ship that right to your door. So you don't even have to literally put on pants. You can just go to the door, pick up 23 bags of plastic baits, and you may think, what the heck am I going to do with 23 bags of plastic baits? Well, guess what? You don't have to buy baits for a while now, or you should not be a wiener and give some to your friends, okay? Give some to your friends. And some of the baits that he makes that I'm actually really excited about is, remember we were talking about the dude, or the rude, I said the dude, the rude tube.
Yeah.
Tube jigs are fantastic.
Yeah.
Again, like I said,
they're coming back into style, which I like to see because they've worked forever. They never stopped working.
100%. And the thing I like about Jeff is his colors he makes are really good.
Yeah.
A lot of bait companies, like, I find it sometimes there's certain colors, like say like green pumpkin.
This comes in 100 colors. I'm like, I
No,
don't care. I use 6 of them.
Exactly. He has the colors that you want. Nothing weird, nothing crazy. Some cool color shift colors, but all the colors that you'd actually want. So we're excited about that. Again, like I said, definitely look at the ripple worm too.
Yeah.
That's like a little drop shot bait. Fantastic. He makes ice fishing baits. He makes grubs. He makes big paddle swim baits. He makes finesse worms. He makes stick baits. Everything.
Yep.
And he has these like the cool core shot ones, like the stick baits, and it's like a color infused in another color. They look amazing.
Are we gonna spill the beans on something else though?
Yes. Okay. So this is
hot off the presses.
Hot off the presses. So
as of recording, has not been announced yet.
So ask yourself, listener, what bait recently has every company come out with because
it works.
It is killer. If a bait company doesn't have this, they're dumb. What is it?
It's the Goober Goby.
So it's a goby bait.
So a lot of them, they're very simplistic. Again, they work great still.
Yep.
This one here, especially if you are into like the small details, this thing looks
real.
Yeah.
It looks real.
It's like they just took a goby and then just like melted it into steel, which good riddance, and then popped it out. Like, all right, here's your mold. Like this thing looks legit.
It's a very realistic goby mold.
Yeah.
So it's 2 5/8 of an inch long, and it comes in 8 colors. And the colors that he has, like we said, they're the colors that you need.
Yeah. So the
It's
colors
nothing
that
crazy. He's not going to have like a fluorescent pink goby. Maybe he is. I
don't know.
But probably not.
But yeah, like we saw a picture of the one he showed us, and it's like a pumpkin, green pumpkin color.
Yeah.
And it looks awesome. Again, like the detail.
If you saw
on this
that thing sitting on a rock in the water, you'd be like, "Oh, look, a goby." You wouldn't even think it's a bait. Which is
try
awesome.
and step on it.
Yeah.
And then I'd get a hook in my foot. I'm like, oh no.
Now, why are gobies so? Why is everyone making goby baits? Now, Jeff at Limestone Lures obviously understands that like gobies in Ontario, again, they're an invasive species.
Yeah.
The cool thing about gobies is they spawn multiple times a year. They basically have no defense mechanism.
They're the rabbits of the water.
They are literally, they're dumb. If you ever seen them swim in the bottom, they literally just hop along the bottom. They can't swim very fast. They get big now.
Yeah.
I've seen them up to 8 inches, like big ones. They're everywhere, and they repopulate crazy.
They're into they're getting into the Corfas.
They're in the Corfas
too,
now,
like,
yeah. They're in the St. Lawrence. They're in all the lakes, Lake Simcoe.
Otonabee River is getting some now.
Yep. They're all over the place.
And the Trent Canal now. They're in the Trent Canal, so they're making their way up. They're going to be everywhere eventually.
Now, you may say, oh, like that's bad. They're invasive. But guess what? Fish eat them. They're dumb. The gobies are dumb. Like fish can literally fill up on them, and they literally are so dumb they don't even hide.
But
all the game fish are eating them.
All the game fish eat them.
Walleye, pike,
and they're
especially
fatty
smallmouth
fish.
And largemouth.
They're a great thing because we oftentimes don't have like the big shad schools and stuff like that or ciscos in our lakes.
Yeah,
and so these kind of fill that gap.
Oh yeah,
so that's a big reason why we talked about earlier. Smallies are getting bigger.
Yeah,
is because they have smallies especially love feeding on these gobies. They sit on the bottom on the rocks. And now all of a sudden their food came to them. And
it's crazy. And a lot of Americans would be like, oh, you guys have bass in Canada. I'll tell you what, it's probably easier for a lot of pros to catch a 30-pound bag of smallmouth on the St. Lawrence than it is in a lot of the lakes in the southern states of largemouth.
And again,
they're giant.
That's 2 reasons. Again, like we already talked about, it's the fact that they're getting bigger because of warmer temperatures and gobies in here, and also because you can find them with the technology nowadays.
Yeah.
Before you had to, focus on what you could see, so which was shore fishing. So you're catching largemouth. But now you look at all the pro anglers pretty much on a lot of these northern areas in Canada in the tournament series, and they're targeting smallies because the smallies are bigger and they can find them now.
Yeah, in deep water with forward-facing sonar. Yeah. Which again,
but
fish are getting used to it. So guess what? It's not going to be an advantage forever.
Yeah, and just I guess for the average Joe, if you're out there fishing and you don't have live scope or forward-facing sonar, or you don't even have side scan or something, do what you can to locate, a couple rock piles, if you can, with your regular do it the old-fashioned way. Get your depth finder. See, it's like, oh, there's a weird bump there. Drop a jig on it. See if it's hard. See if there's fish around there. If you can find a couple spots like that, go back there with goby baits and just hop those along the bottom.
Yeah.
And if there's those bass, if they've learned to feed on goby because the goby have taken over in that lake, then you're going to start catching fish.
So the goober goby, which is a hilarious name. It reminds me of SpongeBob, Goofy Goober. Yeah. The goober goby. It's going to be a killer. And ice fishing too. They use them under the ice for lake trout and whitefish. So anyway, we're excited about that. If you're interested in checking out Jeff's Limestone Lures goby bait, definitely check out his website.
100%.
Again, we're going to link his Instagram, his website, and everything down in the show notes. So if you would like to support us in this podcast, please support our podcast sponsors. That's how you can support us, because the more support that they get, the more willing they are to do another giveaway with us in the future. So anyway, we're kind of running a little short on time, so we're going to go through the last few of our pet peeves. And one of my pet peeves is how fast these podcasts go. Man, I was like, oh, we have enough time. We don't. So we're going to go quick through this. So one pet peeve that people have is friends borrowing lures and gear and using it or breaking it. I hate that. I hate when Andrew borrows all my stuff. But
I don't mind sharing lures, but
the rule is,
you give it back at the end of the day.
If you lose it, you buy me a brand new one. I don't care if it's old. You buy me a brand new one.
And if you hook me with a bait, I get to keep it.
You get to keep it. Yeah. That's the rule. My thing is, even like we work with tools for a living. If you need to borrow something more than twice, buy your own. That's literally how it works. After that, it's just becoming an annoyance. A lot of people have pet peeves of if they're fishing with friends that don't know how to tie knots. Now, again, I don't really fish with a lot of people that don't know how to tie knots, because I generally mostly fish with Andrew, and he knows how to tie knots. But I can see how that would be annoying, because you'd have to tie knots for them all the time, or else if they tied a crappy knot, you'd have to be like, I don't want to lend them a lure because it's going to
like when I used to tie improved clinch knot on all my braided lines, I'm like, I don't know why half the time it just slips out.
I'd say, though, like a lot of people said they find it annoying that they have a friend that maybe only knows how to tie one knot. Now, very briefly, when it comes to knots, there are a few people that are like, like 20 different knots, or they're like, oh, that knot's not as good as this one. The reality is, if you know how to tie probably like 3 knots, you're good.
Yeah. I have 2 knots I use for braid depending on the thickness. I have 1 knot for fluorocarbon and mono, and then I have 1 knot that I use to tie my leader to my main line. Yeah. So I have 4 knots that I use. That's it. I'm fully covered. I don't have any issues.
Exactly. And like knots, I hate when people are like, well, I watched this knot strength video on YouTube, and this knot is 98%, and this knot's only 92%. If you're ever straining your gear to that point, you're fishing wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't care about knot strength. It's more about go with a good knot that you're confident in.
Yeah.
A lot of people were like, oh, if you don't know how to tie the FG knot, you're not fishing. What did we do before it was invented? Oh, we used the other knots that didn't fail on us.
And that's the thing.
Use a good knot.
And use a knot that you can tie consistently.
And correctly, yeah.
Yes. If you have this awesome knot that you get great 50% of the time, that's no longer a great knot for you.
You're going to cry. Anyway, we are gonna get into an episode about knots actually coming up.
Excellent.
Okay, another one is we kind of covered this, snaggers and poachers.
Yeah.
It makes my blood boil when I go down to the creek and there's just gutted fish.
I've called M&R and a couple people.
Yeah.
Because again, like you have to. Like it's ridiculous.
They'll gut fish, take their eggs, and leave them there, gasping for death, disembowel them.
They gut males looking for eggs because they're that much of a genius.
If you're that kind of person that does that, I have no words for you. Like, you are literally a piece of trash. If you can disembowel a living creature and just leave it to gasp to death on the side.
And that's completely different than anglers where they might keep a small hen. They'll keep the skein, they'll eat it, or they'll give it to a friend who's a smoker who wants to eat it, whatever.
Yeah.
And they'll keep like their 1 fish a year, they get their skein from it. Or they sometimes when they're loose eggs, they'll just massage them out. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's ethical.
But if you're gonna take eggs from a fish, dispatch it in a respectful way. Don't literally do it while it's still alive. That's barbaric.
And then be cautious of who you're supporting then with your eggs, because if you're buying eggs from poachers, they're just going to keep doing it. There are places that we talked about before where they get their eggs from farmed fish. So it's not just snagging and stuff like that. These fish were already being killed for food, so it's completely ethical sourced as well.
Exactly. One other pet peeve that people have, and I know these 2 comments, and these are 2 buddies that are messing with each other. People that think spending more will help them catch more fish. And you know who that's from. And I'll tell you a secret. There are people, you shouldn't, here's the thing. When you become a mature person, you'll realize that you don't care what other people do. Like, I don't care if Andrew buys a $50 fishing lure and I'm buying a $4 fishing lure. I don't care, because that's him, that's me. But I can tell you some facts. So for instance, very briefly, I've had a few people be like, oh, I buy these cheap lures and you don't have to buy those expensive, mega bass jerk baits, all that stuff. The difference is, say you buy, say, a Rapala Husky jerk. Nothing wrong with that bait. Mm-hmm. That's a great bait. It's $9. Does it cast far?
No.
They suck, okay? They suck for casting because they don't have a weight transfer system. They don't cast far. Now, say I get a nice Japanese lure with a nice magnetic cast system in it. How much farther can I cast that bait than a Husky jerk? I'm not joking.
Double.
I'd say 40 to 50% farther. Now, if I'm covering water, who's going to catch more fish if we're fishing the same bait?
Yeah.
The person that's lure is more efficient. So it's not about cost, it's more about efficiency. And sometimes more efficient lures cost more money. That's just my opinion. There are several things. Like, I don't think that you'll catch more fish if you have more expensive gear. But if it's my hobby and I want to enjoy it, I should be able to buy whatever I want. I don't care what other people think. Like, yeah, you can use an ugly stick and a $30 reel to catch fish. But guess what? You only live once. I'm only going to, I'm going to buy a nice combo to enjoy fishing while I'm out. If you want to use something cheap and you're fine with that, that's fine. But if you're a gear junkie, you like using good gear. So it really shouldn't matter what other people think.
Fish don't see what's above the water. No. It's about the fisherman's preference.
But here's the thing. Say you're fishing deep water smallmouth and you're drop shotting in waves. Are you going to feel more bites on an ugly stick or a $700 G Loomis drop shot rod?
700 G Loomis.
Oh, you can't, because it doesn't matter. The fish don't care what you're holding. Oh, wait. Techniques and gear does make the difference sometimes, okay? And we can go on a whole rant on this. But use the best gear you can afford.
Yes.
And if you don't care about gear, use cheap gear. No one cares. The other buddy messes this. He finds it annoying when people who don't go to local tackle shops and only order off AliExpress or Amazon.
Okay, now I know who this is.
Okay. So here's the thing. Again, I don't care where you buy your baits, but it does affect local tackle shops. Like, say everyone just stopped buying from local tackle shops and bought all their junky knockoff lures that literally, some of them may be similar, a lot of them aren't. They're actually junk.
Some of them you open the package and they're already broken.
Yeah. I've had people show me like cheap baits that they get and they're broken. They're like, oh, I bought it for $3 on AliExpress. It broke. Okay. It's junk. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you catch fish on those? 100%. Can you catch fish on dollar store lures? 100%.
Yeah.
But if you're a bougie gear snob, like tackle junkie, you're not going to buy junk like that.
No.
Now, if you like using junk like that, that's fine. Will it affect your local tackle shop?
Like using junk like that?
Some people don't care. Some people just like to go fishing. They don't really care what they're using. You can use whatever. Like, if you can only afford dollar store lures, that's fantastic. You're going to catch fish. If you want to buy expensive stuff, go for it.
I would have more confidence in spending my money on a good leader so I don't get bit off and a nice jerk bait than I would buying 6 super cheap jerk baits.
Yeah.
I feel way more confident I'll get a lot more fish out of that purchase and that value than multiple cheap baits.
And it's about confidence. You may have confidence in a cheaper lure. That's fine. There's lots of budget price lures that we have.
I have a lot of like the knockoff companies. There's one bait I absolutely love and I can't get anymore. It's the old Canadian Tire brand of fishing lures. And Mr. Big Fish, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple of those, and I'm not sure what it is, but I have ultimate confidence in these crankbaits on a couple lakes that I fished them when I was a kid, and these lures still work today, and I love them. And again, they were like $3 lures.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of these lures, like people be like, oh, they're all made in the same factory. Well, guess what? A Chevy Cruze and a Corvette is made in the same factory. Are they the same performance? No. Okay. Anyway, we're gear snobs. We like gear. We also grew up using inexpensive budget gear.
And like I said, buying the best gear you can afford, because for me, oftentimes I'll have, value-wise, a lot less valuable combo than Jesse will.
Yeah.
Or baits in general. For a long time, Jesse was the one with bougie. Now that I'm getting into BFS, this year I invested in a really nice BFS reel. I saved up. I'm getting some nice Japanese BFS baits. Yeah. But again, I'm investing into that.
Because it's your hobby. You like it.
I like it. But for a long time, like Jesse and I, we had fairly,
opposite range combos.
Opposite range. But again, I didn't have the lowest of the low. I would get like a mid-price point where I'm getting some of the good features, but I can still afford it. And for me, that's still like my perfect range that I love to be in, because I can still be effective on the water and my pocketbook isn't as sad as it could be.
Yeah. The other thing too is like, it's about your personal enjoyment. Like, I don't care if you want to use a lower price combo. I have lower price combos that I use as well. Like if I'm going fishing with my nephew, I'm fishing an ugly stick. I'm not fishing like a G Loomis, But those times when we're fishing together and I'm like, oh, here, try this rod. When you cast it, you're like, oh, this is so nice.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. That's why people buy expensive cars or people buy a nice couch. It's because they enjoy it when they use it. Okay.
Yes.
Don't judge other people if they decide to enjoy their hobby, or don't judge other people if they feel like they don't need that, because some people don't care. They just want to go out and enjoy the fishing. They don't really care about the rod and reel in their hand. And again, people spend money
full kudos to those
on what
people.
they enjoy, right?
Yeah.
Like some people that are like, oh, I'd never spend, $200 on a fishing rod, but they'll buy $100 bottle of scotch.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, like we all spend our money on what we like. One of the biggest pet peeves, and we're going to kind of wind down here because we're over the hour mark here, is boaters cutting you off on the shoreline or fishing too close. And we kind of covered that. Like, we all have to share the water. Remember that time we were out fishing that Kawartha Lake? And
we have a slower boat.
Guy in a bass boat cut us off. Yeah. And we were casting clearly towards a certain area, and he drove right in front. So I whipped a cast right in front of his boat, and he yelled at us, hey, you see I'm here? It's like, we were fishing along this bank, and you cut us off and basically put his power poles down right in front of where we were fishing. Yeah. And I find, no offense to guys with bass boats, they oftentimes have a bit of an ego, I've noticed. Yeah. And they think that they're the king of the lake. They get to fish where they want.
And they'll plug your fish too. Like we were fishing earlier this spring, and we don't know the lake super well, so we're just fishing like the shoreline up, the edge. And every single time we'd go to, like, we're approaching, like, oh, we're working our way up to that spot, we're gonna fish on the way there. Yeah. Because we have a slower boat, and this guy kept ripping, like, he'd pull up his anchor or his power poles and rip over right in front of us and then fish that spot that we were going to. It's like, and he does that like 4 or 5 times along the way. It's like, look, man, like, stay at your spot, go to the end, work towards us, like, take half of it. Like, why why are you plugging all the good spots on us as we go along? Yeah. So again,
it's annoying, but I mean, we all have to share the water. But guess what? If I'm fishing along the shoreline and someone cuts me off, I'm going to cast directly towards them. Yeah, that's just the way it is. Because the thing is, the shoreline is the shoreline. You can cut someone off, but go way ahead of them. Yeah. I shouldn't be able to cast a bait and hit your boat.
Jokes on them though, because we were fishing behind them and still catching good fish.
Yeah, that's actually funny, because they were fishing through spots, and we'd pull up to like some area and pull some crappie out that they clearly didn't catch for some reason. Yep. Anyway, 2 minutes before us. So anyway, I thought that was a funny episode because there's a lot, and seriously, we didn't get to cover even half of those. There were so many of them. Yeah. And some of them I just didn't want to do because they were just too angering. It's like, But again, we'd like to thank Jeff at Limestone Lures. Again, if you don't win this giveaway, which we're going to announce on our Instagram, so make sure you're checking that out in our stories. A lot of people have asked me lately, maybe that are new to the podcast. They're like, oh, how do I enter? You can only enter on our Instagram account. Make sure you follow us on Average Ontario Anglers on Instagram. We will post a question and answer poll on our stories, and that is the only way you can enter for now. But again, we'd like to thank Jeff. Like, that's a huge prize.
Yeah, that's awesome.
23 bags of baits, and like I saw that it was just a big pile, but there's a bunch of tubes in there. Yeah. There's a bunch of worms.
I do like that some of our giveaway partners are starting to compete a bit with each other. They're all stepping up their game because we've been getting such good ones from these awesome people who are supporting it, and that's making the next people that come in like, all right, I have to do just as good. And it's great. And again, we love it because we get to give it away to you guys. And the more people that get interested in it, the more benefit these companies have, because they're going to get more customers and they're more likely to give bigger prizes. So again, that's why we like to do the giveaways every single week. And we've been really fortunate to have some awesome companies that are supporting us. So
that being said, if you are a smaller company, contact us and we can definitely work out a smaller giveaway if that's what you can handle at the time.
Yeah. We don't want anyone to give beyond their means.
Oh, for sure. Because again, this is a fun fishing podcast for local Ontario people, and we're happy to support large companies and small companies. So definitely send us a message and we'll get back to you on that. So again, 23 baits from Limestone Lures. If you win, check out our Instagram. Make sure you're checking that, because man, like all these giveaways, I'm like, dude, I wish I could enter. Yeah. Because we don't they're like 23 bags. And then I'm like looking at my tackle box. I mean, I have a lot of bait, but I'm like, these look so good. And you know what? They always put their best colors in. Like you said with a few giveaways ago, it was just like some companies are like, oh, here's the stuff that I had left over from last year. But these are all like the top colors that you want.
These are prime colors.
Yeah. They're showcasing all their really cool colors. So definitely, I'm annoyed that I can't win these giveaways.
Before we finish off, I just wanted to do one last little thing.
All right.
I wanted to thank Jesse because he is the guy that does all the editing on these podcasts. If you like it, he's the guy that does it. So I just wanted to thank him by giving him the Fish Award.
Oh,
so this is for your excellent work on the podcast thus far.
sweet.
And if there's anything that I am ever deemed worthy of for receiving an award, feel free to just give that back.
I will pass on the trophy. Now, if you're listening to this, it's a little like, where'd you find this, Valley Village? It's a little trophy with a golden trout jumping out of the water on it. But I'm honored to hold this. Thanks, man. Yeah. You know what? Just to end off this podcast, we'd like to thank all of our listeners. We actually get a ton of messages every week on our Facebook and our Instagram. People are like, we really like the podcast. I started listening to it. I'd never listened to a podcast before, and I decided to do that. And we've had a few people say, how can we support you guys? And the thing that we're saying right now is, like I said before, support our podcast sponsors. Mm-hmm. That helps them, which helps them, do future giveaways, or they post it on their stories. It gets more people following the podcast now. In the future, who knows? We might do like a limited shirt release or something. Then you can support us that way. But for now, definitely just go on their website. Mm-hmm. If you don't win the giveaway, buy a few bags of plastics and say in the comments, there's always a comment in your order. Be like, yes, we heard you on the podcast. That would be a huge deal if you could do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And again, to help support us personally, please leave a review, subscribe, download the episodes, all those things that helps us just to get found by more people who hopefully will appreciate the podcast.
Yeah, and we're approaching 1,000 downloads a week, which is
awesome.
Fantastic. Very amazing. So we'd like to thank you all again for that. And this was episode 13. It's been quite a ride so far, but episode 14 coming up next week is pretty sick. And I'm not even going to give you any secrets about what it is. So you're going to have to wait for that. But anyway, thanks for listening to this podcast. And again, this is Jesse and Andrew from Average Ontario Anglers.